When Taehyung asked, "Are you in love with me?" Jungkook's eyes widened, his body froze in mid-step, a storm raging behind the calm surface of his expression. The backstage room hummed faintly with the distant pulse of stage lights, the soft whir of ventilation, and a silence so thick it could be cut with a knife. Taehyung's voice trembled, fragile yet piercing, slicing through the air between them as though every word carried the weight of years unspoken. Jungkook didn't turn immediately. His hand lingered on the doorknob, back rigid, as if avoiding eye contact could somehow delay the inevitable implosion that had already begun in his chest. Taehyung stood perfectly still, fists tight at his sides, breathing short, bracing for the answer he dreaded yet desperately needed. Jungkook's reflection in the mirror across the room was motionless, eyes blank, staring at the man in the glass as though he were already witnessing the destruction that question would cause. "Don't do this," Jungkook whispered, barely audible, but Taehyung's question hung in the air like a shattering echo. The words were out, and now the truth demanded confrontation. Taehyung's breath hitched. "Say it, I need to hear it." Slowly, carefully, Jungkook turned, each movement deliberate as if peeling away layers of himself to reveal the raw core underneath. He looked at Taehyung not as a friend, not as a bandmate, but as the one who had lived in every unspoken thought, every sidelong glance, every stolen second of their time together. His voice was calm, eerily so, almost inhuman. "No, I'm not." Taehyung blinked, stunned, his mind reeling. "What?" he whispered, barely believing the words. "I'm not in love with you." And just like that, something inside him shattered quietly, irreversibly. It wasn't a scream, not a dramatic collapse, just the slow unraveling of hope, the soft, devastating implosion of a heart that had been waiting far too long. Jungkook stood rigid, expression unreadable, as Taehyung's face shifted from confusion to disbelief, finally settling on anguish. "You lied," he croaked, stepping forward, voice rising. "All those nights, the things you said when no one was around, was that all just pity?" Jungkook's jaw clenched, eyes flashing with a mixture of regret and pain. "It wasn't pity," he said quietly. "It was real, but it wasn't love." Taehyung laughed bitterly, the sound dry and hollow, the echo of grief that had nowhere to go. "Then what was it, Jungkook?" he demanded, voice cracking. "What was all of it?" Jungkook's gaze sharpened, flickering with a mix of anger and sorrow. "You believed in something I was never brave enough to claim. That's on me, and I'm sorry, but don't ask me to pretend." The hallway outside was nearly empty, flickering exit signs casting uncertain shadows, and the tension between them became almost tangible, vibrating like electricity in the air. "You already got your answer," Jungkook muttered, keeping his back turned. Taehyung moved closer, boots echoing on the polished floor. "No, what I got was a coward's escape." Jungkook's shoulders tensed. "You think I'm a coward?" he asked softly. Taehyung's breath hitched, words weighed down with every unspoken memory. "I think you've been lying to both of us so long, you've forgotten what truth feels like." He stepped closer, and the air between them seemed to pulse with unspoken pain. "You played along too," Jungkook said, voice low but sharp. "Every smile, every touch, every glance, you knew. You let me believe because it hurt less than wondering. And now you say it meant nothing." "I never said it meant nothing," Taehyung replied, voice trembling. "Then say what it did mean. Look at me, say it." Jungkook didn't speak. He just stared, jaw tight, fists shaking at his sides. The weight of years pressed down on them both, and in that silence the unspoken truth lingered. Everything they had denied, hidden, and feared was now on the verge of unraveling. "You can face stadiums full of screaming fans," Taehyung said bitterly, "but not the one person who actually gave a damn about you." Jungkook's eyes narrowed. "Don't pretend you're the only one who cared," he shot back. "I would have burned the world down for you, Taehyung." "Then why didn't you?" Taehyung shouted, tears threatening to spill. "Why let me stand there begging while you threw your silence like knives?" "Because loving you meant destroying everything else I had built," Jungkook's voice roared, echoing through the room. "Our group, our fans, my family, they watch everything. You think they'd allow this?" Taehyung's heart twisted, the weight of betrayal and longing crushing him. "So you chose them," he demanded. "You chose perfect image over us." I chose survival, Jungkook said, voice ragged. You think I didn't dream of a world where I could hold your hand, kiss you in public, look at you without fear? I did, but the risk, it was too high. Taehyung stepped back, chest heaving. Then we could have had it all, you just had to say yes. It was always real for me, Jungkook said. Still is. They froze, the silence almost sacred, broken only by the distant hum of the studio. Then tell me, Taehyung whispered, voice breaking. If the world didn't exist, if no one cared, would your answer be different? Jungkook's eyes softened, shadows of regret and longing flickering across his face. If no one was watching, I would have loved you out loud, he admitted. Taehyung's knees threatened to buckle, but Jungkook caught him, their bodies colliding in a tangle of grief and desire, breaths mingling, hearts pounding in tandem. By the time the leaked hallway video hit the internet, it was already chaos. A grainy 30-second clip of Taehyung holding Jungkook, their faces impossibly close, words whispered with intimacy, had exploded across social media. Hashtags trended within minutes, #Taehyung, truth over fear, let them love, flooding every corner of fan communities and mainstream media. The world had seen the moment they never intended to show. Taehyung's phone buzzed nonstop, messages pouring in from friends, fans, and news outlets alike. The press had latched on to the narrative, twisting the video into every headline imaginable. BTS's Taehyung and Jungkook caught in secret affair, one screamed. Idol scandal shocks fans worldwide, read another. Yet in the middle of this storm, Jungkook remained silent, sitting across from him in their shared apartment, face pale, eyes fixed on the floor. They're crucifying him, Taehyung said, bursting into the room, sunglasses perched awkwardly atop his head, mask half down, panic written across every line of his face. He showed Taehyung his phone, scrolling through tweets, news articles, and death threats. HYBE is preparing a statement. They're going to say it was staged, rehearsed, scripted. They'll claim it was a misunderstanding. Taehyung clenched his fists, teeth grinding. We're safer as fiction, he murmured, voice raw. Maybe you should step forward, Taehyung urged, or they'll bury him alone. Taehyung's eyes met Jungkook's, filled with fire, desperation, and the weight of unspoken promises. If we go public together, they can't erase either of us, he whispered, voice tight. Jungkook's chest rose and fell, conflicted. And if it destroys everything we've built, he asked quietly. Then let it burn, Taehyung said, sharp and unwavering. The decision was made. Minutes later, Jungkook stormed into the HYBE boardroom unannounced. Executives froze, papers trembling in their hands, phones poised to record. Director Han's face was a mask of controlled fury. You're not authorized, he began, but Jungkook cut him off. You should have answered me, Jungkook said, voice low but fierce. Taehyung stepped beside him, heart pounding, watching as the world of control and perfection they had been trapped in began to crumble. We either do this together or not at all. Cameras snapped, phones recorded, and within seconds the live feed had exploded. 800,000 viewers, then over 1 million, all witnessing the truth raw and unfiltered. Fans were screaming, crying, some furious, others cheering, but the power of honesty was undeniable. HYBE's PR team scrambled, security moved in, but it was too late. The truth had leaked, and the narrative was no longer theirs to control. When Director Han demanded silence, Jungkook's calm, burning reply cut through like steel. We are not here to represent a company. We are here to represent ourselves. Taehyung nodded, voice steady. This isn't a scandal, it's the truth, and we refuse to apologize for being human. Journalists shouted questions, but for once neither stepped back. One brave reporter asked, "Are you admitting to a romantic relationship?" Taehyung and Jungkook's eyes met, a history of shared glances, stolen moments, and silent declarations flowing in a single look. We are not putting labels on this for your convenience. Taehyung said sharply, voice firm. We are simply done hiding who we are. Gasps and murmurs erupted. Some clapped, others froze, disbelief written across every face in the room. Social media immediately erupted as well. Protect Taehyung trended in over 40 countries. The choice was no longer just theirs. It belonged to the world to witness. But HYBE was relentless. Within 20 minutes, the company released a statement, branding them unstable, emotionally confused, and ungrateful, attempting to frame the narrative as though both were mentally unfit. Media outlets clung to the story, quoting anonymous sources and publishing fabricated claims. Some fan accounts unfollowed en masse. Others doubled down, defending them with essays, banners, and viral campaigns demanding justice. In their apartment, the silence was heavy. Taehyung stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear. It was the first time in months his older brother had called. "You're about to lose everything," he said, voice grave. "This isn't just about you anymore." Taehyung swallowed hard. "I can't leave him," he whispered, voice barely audible. "He's not just someone I love, he's a part of me that I've never been allowed to show." Jungkook listened quietly, eyes glassy but not breaking. "You don't have to stay in this if it's too much," he said softly. "If you want out now." Taehyung shook his head, voice raw, unwavering. "I'm in too deep. I've spent too long pretending you weren't the one I ran toward every time the world got too loud. So what do we do now?" Jungkook inhaled, the weight of it nearly crushing him, but he held firm. "We keep telling the truth," he said, voice steady, "even if it breaks us." Behind HYBE's fortified offices in a hidden surveillance hub, Director Han watched every move. His lips curled into a cold smile. "Let them speak," he murmured. "The world only listens until they bleed." A new plan was quietly set into motion, targeting them in ways they couldn't anticipate: private recordings, edited footage, and fabricated statements designed to fracture trust and loyalty. The next morning, Taehyung awoke to his phone vibrating violently. Jungkook sat beside him, knees drawn to his chest, staring at a dark screen like it might betray him if touched. "Don't look yet," Jungkook warned, voice thin, frayed. "They released audio," he finally said, handing Taehyung the phone. Taehyung's stomach dropped. He pressed play, hearing his own voice, distorted, intimate, spliced together with Jungkook's words to suggest manipulation and shame. "They took two different conversations and stitched them together," he whispered, horror flooding his chest. Jungkook's hands shook. "Everyone believes it," he admitted. Taehyung grabbed his phone back violently, scrolling through comments, the narrative spiraling out of their control. They were painting Jungkook as a victim and Taehyung as the home wrecker. "They're rewriting my entire existence," Jungkook said, chest heaving, eyes wide. "You're not the one bleeding here, I am." "You never were the villain," Taehyung said fiercely, heart breaking with each word. "You never will be." They realized the battle wasn't just with fans, media, or the world. It was with the system itself, a machine that owned their contracts, their images, their past, and tried to dictate their love. But Taehyung's grip on Jungkook tightened. "Then we fight, together, whatever it takes." The days blurred into endless live streams, confrontations with legal advisors, and moments stolen in apartments filled with fear and love. HYBE threatened injunctions, gag orders, and legal action, trying to manipulate them into issuing a public statement that would erase their truth. Taehyung and Jungkook refused every demand. "We were never supposed to fall in love," Taehyung whispered one night, raw voice trembling as they held each other close. "And when we did, they told us to lie or lose everything. But I refused to pretend anymore." Their live streams reached millions, 10 million viewers in the first 3 minutes. Fans cried, shouted, some furious, some overjoyed, but none indifferent. The duo's declaration was clear. They would forfeit money, endorsements, and even the rights to their past, but never their future, their love, or their truth. But HYBE's retaliation was relentless. They released counterstatements branding them as delusional, unstable, and emotionally dependent. Every private moment was weaponized, edited, and broadcast to twist the story. Yet in their apartment, in the quiet between the chaos, Taehyung and Jungkook clung to each other, hearts raw but united. "We'll survive it together," Taehyung whispered, "even if the world comes for us." And somewhere behind the mirrored glass of a corporate office, director hand-pressed send on another devastating leak. The machinery of control was ready to erase them, not for scandal, not for justice, but for power. The following days were a blur of chaos, each hour punctuated by flashing notifications, relentless news cycles, and the endless hum of social media. Every phone, every tablet, every screen became a battlefield. Fans, journalists, and anti-fans alike dissected every gesture, every glance from Taehyung and Jungkook. They were no longer just idols. They were symbols both of rebellion and of vulnerability, caught in a storm they could not control. Taehyung's apartment had transformed into a war room. Notes scattered across the coffee table, laptops open to trending hashtags, emergency messages from allies, and dozens of screenshots of manipulated clips. Jungkook sat silently on the edge of the couch, his hands clasped, jaw tight, eyes flicking between Taehyung and the endless chaos on the screens. "They're trying to frame me as unstable," Jungkook murmured, voice low, almost swallowed by the noise around them. "And you're the reason it's all happening." Taehyung's gaze softened but didn't waver. "I'm the reason you can breathe for the first time in years," he said, voice trembling slightly. "And I won't let them take that from you." It wasn't just fans anymore. It was HYBE's legal machinery, moving with precision and ruthless intent. Lawyers sent emails threatening injunctions. Internal investigators were monitoring every public interaction, and private recordings, carefully edited, were making their rounds in trusted channels and anonymous news outlets. Every movement, every word Taehyung and Jungkook had ever shared was under microscopic scrutiny. "Your next move will define your entire career," a lawyer warned via encrypted call, voice cold, calculating. "Every statement you make, every post you release, is now legally binding." Taehyung ran a hand through his hair, packing the apartment, mind spinning. "Then we don't make statements, we live and we fight. Not for careers, not for contracts, but for us, for the truth." Jungkook's voice was barely audible. "The truth, it's going to hurt, more than we can imagine. The world won't just watch, they'll decide who dies in the story." "They can try," Taehyung said, taking a step closer, eyes blazing. "But they won't win." The first official leak hit 3 days later, a video of Jungkook alone in the practice room, crying, whispering Taehyung's name, overlaid with dramatic music and captions suggesting coercion. Social media erupted. Comments alternated between sympathy, rage, and disbelief. Hashtags exploded. Taehyung the manipulator, #Jungkook victim, BTS disintegrates. Jungkook's hands shook as he scrolled, the narrative spiraling out of control. "They're making me the villain," he said, chest tight, eyes glassy. "Everything I did for him, they've twisted it. I've never wanted this." Taehyung grabbed his wrist, firm and grounding. "Then we take it back, together. Every lie, every spin, they're only effective if we stay silent, but we're not silent anymore." That night they prepared for another live broadcast, planning every detail. No filters, no managers, no PR, just themselves and the world. The live stream began with Taehyung's voice cutting through the digital noise. "We were never supposed to fall in love, and when we did, we were told to hide it, to lie, to erase everything that felt real. We refuse to do that any longer." Jungkook stepped beside him, breathing steady despite the storm outside. "Every rumor, every manipulated clip, every statement against us, we will not let them define our story. Not anymore." The chat exploded. Millions tuned in, sending hearts, messages of love, outrage, and support pouring into the stream. They were no longer just idols, they were human, raw, exposed. And for a fleeting moment, that honesty outweighed every attack, every threat. But HYBE didn't rest. Within hours, a second leak appeared. Audio recordings, carefully edited, overlaying fragments of Taehyung's voice suggesting coercion, misinterpretation, emotional manipulation. The comments turned venomous. Even some fans wavered, unsure what to believe. Jungkook buried his face in his hands. I can't keep this up. They're destroying me. Taehyung knelt before him, eyes locked, voice steady yet filled with fire. No, not anymore. You are not alone. You are not guilty. They are trying to break us, but we decide who we are, together. You and me. Not the clips, not the headlines, not the threats. It was a quiet rebellion, the kind that didn't need cameras or validation. Every statement, every live interaction, every post was a small act of defiance, reclaiming their narrative inch by inch. Yet the cost was immense. HYBE escalated with official statements, attempting to terminate contracts, remove endorsements, and isolate them from the rest of the group. The public pressure intensified. Messages flooded in from fans, celebrities, and allies. Some offered support. Others warned of backlash. But in the apartment, there was only the quiet tension between Taehyung and Jungkook, the knowledge that they were fighting not just for love, but for survival, identity, and freedom. Jungkook whispered one night, voice trembling, "If we go down, will it be together?" Taehyung's hand found his. "If we go down standing side by side, but I promise we will not go down alone." The next morning brought yet another twist. A HYBE lawyer arrived at their doorstep, tablet in hand, video footage queued up, a private recording of Taehyung in a practice room months prior, emotions unguarded, completely personal. The lawyer's tone was calm but sharp. "Sign this statement, retract all claims, and you can preserve your career. Refuse, and this footage goes public tomorrow morning." Taehyung stared, jaw tight, heart hammering. "You don't scare me," he said, voice low but fierce. "We will not erase ourselves to save a facade." Jungkook nodded, hands gripping his own knees, eyes locked on Taehyung's. "We survive it together, always," he whispered. The lawyer's expression hardened. "You understand this will ruin you, don't you?" Taehyung stepped forward, unwavering. "No, what will ruin us is pretending we're anything other than who we are. If the world wants to see us broken, let them. We will not break alone, and we will not break each other." Within hours, another live stream began, unfiltered, unscripted. Millions tuned in, hearts racing, eyes glued to the screens. Taehyung spoke first, voice clear, cutting through the noise. "Everything they have tried to weaponize against us, we claim it. Every word, every glance, every truth they tried to bury. We will not apologize for being real, for being human, or for loving one another." Jungkook added, "We are done hiding, done fearing, done pretending. We cannot control the world, but we can control ourselves, and we will survive together." Comments flooded, love and outrage clashing in a digital storm. Fans started campaigns, "Truth over fear, protect Taehyung, let them live." Online debates raged, news outlets scrambled to cover the breaking updates, and HYBE's control faltered in the face of overwhelming public support and scrutiny. Hours later, Taehyung and Jungkook collapsed on the couch, exhaustion washing over them. They held hands, silent but resolute. Outside, the world continued its chaos, but inside there was truth, raw and unfiltered, and the unspoken promise that whatever came next, they would face it together. The storm wasn't over. It wouldn't end soon. But for the first time in years, they weren't hiding, and that, above all, was their victory. The next morning, the apartment was eerily quiet. The screens glowed softly, showing the aftermath of the live stream. The hashtags trending, the articles piling up, the memes, the editorials, the endless flood of opinions. Taehyung sat cross-legged on the floor, phone in hand, watching the reactions pour in, his jaw tight, eyes dark with both anger and resolve. Jungkook stood near the window, arms folded, eyes scanning the city below as if it could provide some clarity. "They're not stopping," he murmured. "HYBE, the media, everyone wants us to crumble." Taehyung didn't look up. "Then we won't give them the satisfaction. They want to erase us. Fine, we'll define ourselves on our own terms, not through a company, not through the narrative they feed the world." It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about defiance. Every headline, every tweet, every edited video was a challenge, a gauntlet thrown down, and they were ready to face it together. By noon, lawyers arrived at the apartment, arriving in sleek black cars, faces masked with professionalism and cold intent. They came with tablets, folders, and a carefully rehearsed list of demands. A live stream of the legal confrontation could have gone viral instantly, but Taehyung and Jungkook refused to be baited. They met the representatives in the living room calm, but the tension was palpable. The lead lawyer, a woman with piercing eyes and a demeanor of calculated authority, laid out the terms. Mr. Kim, Mr. Jeon, if you refuse to issue a public statement disavowing all claims of your relationship and accept a correction of the record as a misunderstanding, your contracts will be terminated immediately. Furthermore, all private footage will be released. Jungkook's hands trembled slightly, but he stood tall. And if we refuse, you'll be legally liable for breach of contract. This will destroy your careers, the lawyer replied flatly. Taehyung rose from the floor, voice steady, fierce. Then let it destroy what isn't ours to sacrifice. We won't apologize for love. We won't rewrite history to make it comfortable for anyone else. And we certainly won't hurt each other to save a company's image. The lawyer's face remained impassive, but a flicker of doubt passed through the team. They had not anticipated defiance like this. HYBE had built an empire on control, on narrative manipulation, on silencing the individuals who brought it to life. Yet here they were, two men refusing to play the role they had been assigned. Jungkook's voice broke the silence, calm but cutting. If you release anything else, videos, audio, anything, you will not just be attacking us. You will be attacking truth, and truth is unstoppable. Taehyung added, we've survived being silenced. We've survived manipulation. We've survived being portrayed as villains for simply being honest. Whatever you release, we'll face it, together. Hours passed. Negotiations stalled. Every minute the digital world outside shifted, with fans rallying in real time. Campaigns were launched, statements drafted, hashtags trending globally. Let Taehyung love, protect their truth, real not staged. Millions tuned in, debating, defending, shouting. The world became their shield and their sword simultaneously. Then came the most devastating blow. HYBE announced an emergency press conference. The network cameras zoomed in on a massive stage, rows of lights and microphones, the backdrop a giant logo of the company. Taehyung and Jungkook sat side by side in the apartment, watching as the official narrative was prepared to go live. The conference began with rehearsed speeches, carefully curated words, and sterile expressions. The claims made by Mr. Kim and Mr. Jeon regarding a personal relationship are false. The videos circulating were misinterpreted and taken out of context. The company maintains its dedication to the integrity of the group and its members. Taehyung slammed his fist on the table, the sound loud against the quiet apartment. They're lying. They're twisting every word, every glance. This isn't just PR, it's manipulation. They're weaponizing our lives. Jungkook placed a hand over Taehyung's. Then we take it to them. We go public without filters, without permission. We take the story back, right now. The decision was instant, mutual. They booted up the live streaming app, double-checked cameras, and prepared. No edits, no scripts, just themselves and the truth. Everyone will hear us, all of it, Taehyung said, voice firm. Not the manipulated clips, not the statements, not the narratives, just the truth. Jungkook nodded, hands slightly shaking. We survive together, whatever comes. The broadcast went live. Millions tuned in instantly. The digital world held its breath. Taehyung spoke first, his voice clear, cutting through the storm of misinformation. For years we have been told to hide who we are. We were told to pretend, to lie, to erase the love that existed between us. We refuse to do that any longer. The clips, the headlines, the leaks, they are only fragments of the truth, distorted to control us. Jungkook stepped forward, adding his voice steady and resolute. We are not victims. We are not mistakes. We are human, and we will not apologize for being human. This is our story, not theirs, not the media's, not HYBE's, ours. The reactions were instantaneous and explosive. Fans wept, cheered, and rallied. The hashtags skyrocketed. The online universe fractured into camps, supporters, skeptics, skeptics turned supporters. The sheer volume of attention made it impossible for HYBE to suppress the narrative completely. Then came the confrontation, a knock on the apartment door. Security had arrived, lawyers with warrants, intent on enforcing HYBE's demands. Taehyung and Jungkook stood side by side, hearts pounding, eyes locked on one another. "Do you want to run?" Jungkook asked quietly. Taehyung shook his head. "We don't run, not from them, not from anyone. We face this together, and if they try to break us, they'll fail." The doors opened, legal teams advancing, cameras flashing, but Taehyung held up a hand. "We are not signing anything. We are not retracting. We are not apologizing for being real. You can enforce the contracts, but you cannot enforce our truth." Hours turned into tense standoffs. Social media continued to rage outside, drawing global attention. Legal threats, pressure, and intimidation collided with the growing wave of public support. Every moment was a calculation, every step a gamble, but they remained unbroken. Finally, after a night of negotiation and standoff, a temporary pause was granted. The lawyers retreated, cameras recording their every move. Taehyung and Jungkook collapsed onto the couch, exhaustion threatening to consume them, but relief washing over in equal measure. "Do you realize what we just did?" Jungkook whispered, voice hoarse, eyes wide. Taehyung laughed softly, bitter and relieved. "We just stood up, that's all. Nothing heroic, nothing grand, just stood up together." For a moment the world outside could wait. For a moment they allowed themselves to breathe, to feel, to exist without filters. Hands intertwined, hearts racing, minds alert but resting. The storm wasn't over. It would never truly end. But in that apartment, amidst the chaos, they had reclaimed something no one could take away: each other, the truth, and the courage to face the world as themselves. And somewhere deep within HYBE's headquarters, the tension was palpable. Directors, legal teams, and PR strategists scrambled to contain the fallout, realizing for the first time that control had limits. No matter how many clips, statements, or threats they released, they could not erase the truth that Taehyung and Jungkook had just claimed together, live and unbroken. The sun had barely risen when the world woke to the news that Taehyung and Jungkook had gone live, unapologetic, unfiltered, and unafraid. Headlines screamed, fan accounts exploded with screenshots and clips, and hashtags spiked higher than ever. But for the two of them, the apartment was quiet, almost impossibly still, the only sound their own breathing and the faint hum of the city outside. Taehyung sat at the edge of the couch, fingers entwined with Jungkook, eyes scanning the notifications that kept rolling in. Some were supportive, some critical, some hateful, and some utterly confused. But they had expected that. They had anticipated backlash, corporate punishment, social media chaos, but not the deep, personal relief that came from finally being honest. "They're going to come for us harder now," Jungkook said softly, voice heavy with concern. "HYBE, the lawyers, the media, it won't stop." Taehyung shook his head slowly, gaze locked on Jungkook. "Let them come. Let the world see exactly who we are, what we feel, and what they've been trying to erase. We can't control how people react, but we control what we refuse to hide." Hours later, a sharp knock at the door announced the arrival of HYBE representatives, flanked by security. Their expressions were cold, calculated, unyielding. They came with tablets and documents, ready to enforce the company's demands. "You have 15 minutes to comply," the lead lawyer stated, her voice clipped and professional. "Issue a statement clarifying your relationship, retract the claims made in your live stream, and your careers may be salvageable. Refuse, and the consequences will be immediate and severe." Jungkook stepped forward instinctively, fists clenching. "And if we refuse?" The lawyer's lips pressed into a thin line. Then contracts will be terminated, legal action will be pursued, and further private footage may be released to the public. Taehyung rose slowly, eyes blazing, chest tight with both fear and resolve. We've already released the truth. We've already risked everything. We will not retract, apologize, or allow anyone to manipulate our lives any longer. The lawyer paused as if the defiance had been unexpected. She gestured sharply to the security team. Then we enforce it. Gentlemen, remove them from the premises if necessary. But Taehyung and Jungkook stood side by side, unwavering. Try it, Taehyung said, voice calm but cutting, and the world will see exactly what you're doing. Outside, the digital storm was already raging. Fans began live streaming reactions, documenting the confrontation and flooding social media with support. Millions were watching in real time, tweeting, sharing, and defending the two men. Every attempt at control by HYBE was being countered with transparency and solidarity from the fanbase. Hours turned into a tense stalemate. Every knock, every email, every call was met with measured resistance. They were outnumbered, outgunned, but never outmatched in courage. Each moment solidified the bond between them, each threat reinforcing their resolve to remain truthful to each other and themselves. Finally, when the representatives left temporarily, Jungkook collapsed onto the couch, head in his hands. I don't know if I can keep doing this, he admitted, voice cracking under the weight of exhaustion and fear. Taehyung kneeled in front of him, cupping his face gently. Then we don't do it alone. We've never been alone, not really. I'm not letting them erase you, and I'm not letting them erase us. They embraced, a long, quiet hold that said more than any words could. It was not a show, not a rebellion for the camera, but a private acknowledgement of survival and resilience. For a moment, nothing else existed except the two of them, hearts beating in tandem, refusing to be silenced. The hours that followed were a blur of media calls, live streams, and strategic planning. Every interaction with HYBE representatives was a battle, every conversation a negotiation of survival versus integrity. Their lawyers, begrudgingly, began to respect the unwavering stance of the two idols. They were not just standing up for themselves, but for the truth, for autonomy, for love. By evening, the world had seen everything. Clips from the apartment live stream were circulating globally, fan reactions amplified, and the narrative was shifting. The hashtags Let Them Love and Truth Over Control were trending in over 50 countries. Editorials debated the implications, media outlets scrambled to adjust their coverage, and fans organized global support campaigns. In the apartment, Taehyung and Jungkook finally allowed themselves a moment to breathe. They sat close, fingers entwined, shoulders touching. The exhaustion was palpable, but the relief even more so. You know, Jungkook whispered, voice soft, almost shy, I've never felt more exposed in my life. Taehyung smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from Jungkook's forehead. Exposure isn't weakness, it's liberation. We don't hide anymore, Jungkook. Not from the world, not from ourselves. They leaned against each other, letting the silence fill the space between them, a comfortable, solid silence. Outside, the world continued to turn, opinions continued to clash, and HYBE scrambled to regain control, but inside the apartment, for once, everything felt in order. It was then that Taehyung spoke again, voice low but resolute. Whatever happens next, we face it together. No lies, no hiding, no compromises on who we are. Do you understand? Jungkook nodded, a tear slipping down his cheek. I understand, and I'm with you, always. The night fell heavy over the city, lights twinkling like distant stars. In their apartment, two hearts beat fiercely, unafraid and unbroken. The journey ahead would be tumultuous, lawsuits, media firestorms, fan wars, corporate battles. But in that moment, they had reclaimed something infinitely more powerful than fame, more valuable than fortune: authenticity, love, and the courage to face the world as themselves. Hours later, the digital universe erupted again. Edited footage, leaks, and speculative reports flooded the internet, attempting to manipulate, to distort, to control. But the live stream of truth had already gone viral, immortalized, unalterable. No matter the spin, no matter the strategy, the world had seen Taehyung and Jungkook standing together, fearless, human, and unashamed. They stayed up until dawn, speaking softly, sharing memories, fears, and hopes for the future. Every confession, every word, every touch reinforced their bond. For the first time in years, neither hid behind smiles for the camera, choreographed gestures, or rehearsed lines. They were real, and that reality was stronger than any scandal, any threat, any power HYBE or the world could wield. When the first light of morning touched the apartment windows, Taehyung and Jungkook sat side by side, watching the city awaken. They were exhausted, bruised, and battered emotionally, but unbroken. And in that exhaustion lay freedom. Freedom from lies, freedom from fear, freedom to love openly, if only in the privacy of the moment. Taehyung squeezed Jungkook's hand gently. "This isn't over," he said softly. "The world hasn't forgiven us. HYBE hasn't stopped, but we've already won something they can't take away." Jungkook leaned his head on Taehyung's shoulder. "What's that?" "Our truth," Taehyung whispered, voice trembling with both relief and lingering fear. "Our love, and that is unstoppable." And as the city bustled below, the world outside roared, and chaos reigned online, the two of them sat together, holding onto each other, and finally, finding a quiet strength in the certainty that they were no longer alone.